Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to a new video. Uh, Thanks for watching. Before we get into it though, please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, especially if you enjoy non-biased election content. Okay, so here we go. As the video suggests, are Democrats potentially throwing out a winnable race? And what do I mean by that? Well, I think I made a video about this before, but it's been a bit. It's about the Wisconsin governor's race. Um, it's a great state, but besides that, though, they have a very competitive election coming up in Wisconsin. Now, here's the deal with this state, because I'd actually say, despite the Supreme Court elections, those technically aren't Republican versus Democrat. They're technically nonpartisan. It has been going pretty well for the Democrats. I will say that as a disclaimer. However, besides that, though, in normal two-party elections, Wisconsin is almost very mixed, right? You have a Republican and a Democrat U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin and Ron Johnson. You have Republicans control the state legislature. Their governor is currently a Democrat, Tony Evers. And it tends mix of Republicans and Democrats for statewide offices. It's a purple state, and typically, what makes this different than other purple states compared to like Michigan and Pennsylvania is that Wisconsin is always just very close. It doesn't matter really on the environment. Naturally, just as close because it's basically a 50-50 state, right? Both sides usually turn out. Democrats typically turn out more, especially that's why you saw the Supreme Court so lopsided. But in general, honestly, it's a very much a 50-50 state. Because even in the presidential election, you have the rural red areas. They're not as rural. They're not as Republican as like the rural areas in Pennsylvania, but they're pretty Republican. And then you have Madison and Milwaukee, and the Milwaukee suburbs, basically, which are some of the most active vote wise, most active Democrats in the nation. They vote in every single election. And Republicans usually turn out, but there's not as much of them as the Milwaukee suburbs and like the Wild counties are pretty Republican areas. So pretty predictable about how the state will vote. Driftless areas kind of more unpredictable, but definitely likes Trump. Based on the last three elections, but this is basically the toss-ups based on 2024. And typically, some of these counties could become likely, or depending on the margins, these northern counties can become safe Democrat. Really depends. Driftless region, again, is hard to say. This county can become likely. But just for the point of the video, this is basically the competitive territory in Wisconsin. And the reason why I think that even if the Democrats do pretty well around the country, right, they should at least be modestly favored going into 2026. They should definitely be in the driver's seat because they're the party out of power. That's typically how it works. They might do really well in swing states, right? You might see Josh Shapiro win by a lot there. It's possible Georgia flips. It's possible that Katie Hobbs wins re-election by a lot, and that Joe Lombardo in Nevada will have a really competitive race. It's possible that Jocelyn Benson wins the three-way race in Michigan. Really depends on the margin. Wisconsin will probably be kind of close, regardless of the outcome. And I can explain why. This isn't an official prediction, this video. But you saw in 2022, for the governor's races, you saw Josh Shapiro win by 15 in Pennsylvania, Gretchen Whitmer win by like 10 in Michigan. And Wisconsin was a pretty decent win for Tony Evers, but it was the closest out of the three. And it always is the closest out of the three Rust Belt states, purple Rust Belt states. So Evers win by around 5 points. That's pretty good. He did overperform expectations, but Tim Michels wasn't the strongest candidate in the world. But you saw in 2018, that was a blue wave year. Their previous governor, Republican Scott Walker, only went down by a tilt margin by Tony Evers. And governors of Wisconsin very rarely win a third term. So this race was pretty close, right? This was in a really blue year. And then you saw in a red year, you saw Scott Walker win by a lot. But it was still within a reasonable margin. That's basically how Wisconsin is voted. You see the same in the presidential election. It was won by a tilt margin in 2016, 2020, and 2024. So when you had uh, Biden win it in 2020, and then you had Trump win it in 16 and 24. You saw it all be under a point, the results, regardless of the national environment. Basically, my point is Wisconsin tends to be close. Given this, the background, given the purple lean of the state, given that it'll probably be competitive regardless of the outcome, unless something crazy happens. Basically, what the deal with this is going into 2026 is that it is set up for a very interesting election. As I mentioned before, the Republicans are probably going to run Tom Tiffany, who, as I explained, pretty strong candidate. He's probably going to win a primary, no problem. He's a pretty good overperformer from the northern part of the state. He's pretty much the Republican who can unite both sides of his party. But he's going to hopefully, for him, if he wants to win, he's going to need to get the little bit of independents that are in the state that we have. And then Democrats, the problem for them is that they have a primary they have to get through. They have a lot of high-profile candidates running. Mandela Barnes, not the strongest candidate, but he is leading in polling. We'll get to polling in a minute. You have Milwaukee County Executive, you have state representatives, and then you have the current Lieutenant Governor, Sarah Rodriguez, who would have been a strong candidate for the Democrats. If I were the Democrats and they wanted to win electorally, the best shot, I'd say she would have been the best candidate. Just like I would say Republicans are putting up the best candidate that they got, which is Tom Tiffany, who's a pretty good candidate. I'd say the problem, though, and the reason why I think that this race is winnable for the Democrats, it is winnable for the Republicans. This race is currently, in my opinion, rated around tilt to leans Democrat. However, as I said, race is winnable for both sides. The Democrats could really be throwing this race away if they nominate a certain candidate, which would be Francisca Hong. The problem with running her is that she is losing to Tom Tiffany in the polling. All the other Democrats, Sarah Rodriguez, David Crowley, Mandela Barnes, they're all leading Tom Tiffany. And I think Rodriguez has the biggest lead over Tiffany. Crowley seems to be doing okay. Mandela Barnes, I've had doubts about him candidate-wise, but he obviously has the name recognition, right? He was lieutenant governor under Evers' first term. Tom Tiffany's a good candidate, right? But if it was against the normal election, I'd say Tiffany loses by around a point or two, right? Just because of the national environment. But if they run Hong, Francesca Hong, she's not really a strong candidate, right? You see her actually losing by a few points to Republican Tom Tiffany, which is not good. And the reason why I think this race could be thrown out by the Democrats is because they could nominate Francesca Hong, right? She's not really a well-known candidate. Why do these other candidates have higher name recognition? Hong doesn't really have much of that, and it seems that she's losing in fundraising. If you want to take a look at what they have all raised, pretty much shows our list. She's only raised around $368,000, compared to leading candidates have raised over double that. However, Hong is still leading the primary. She's not a super great candidate. Now, she can still win, because it is a purple state, right? She's not terrible, but I think that Democrats could potentially be throwing out a winnable race, and Republicans could flip this and catch them off guard. Because there's always that one state that kind of goes off and does their own thing, right? Possible that Wisconsin does this if they nominate a weak candidate. As you see with polling, you see Tom Tiffany leading. And the problem is that it's looking like there is a good shot that she ends up winning the primary. You see her leading. It used to be Barnes, but now it's Francesca Hong. It's not guaranteed. It's going to be a very competitive primary. But as you see here, just according to polling, you see Tiffany winning. This is going to be a very interesting race, though. Definitely encourage you to look at it. But like I said, that's the issue that Democrats could potentially be facing if they nominate a weak candidate. Republicans could potentially flip Wisconsin. It's going to be a very close race, though. This was the closest race percentage-wise in 2024. So both sides are going to want to spend money here, especially you want to win these competitive counties. Basically, you got Door County, which is at the northeastern part. That could potentially be a really competitive place. Again, if you're both sides, you're going to want to win these, and then you have some leaning Republican areas in the central part of the state near the Driftless region. If you see Tiffany win, you'd probably see a map like this, or if you see a Democratic victory, you'd probably see an election more similar to this. But it really is going to depend on who ends up being the nominee. We still don't know enough yet as we see it, so things could certainly change. But as I see this, Democrats should hopefully see this as a warning, and Republicans should definitely have a sign of optimism because they could potentially have a key state to flip. So that's basically what I have to say. I hope you found this video interesting, this content interesting. I appreciate you watching. Again, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. If you enjoy non-biased election content, I'll stick around because I'll have more content coming out in the near future. So again, thank you, and we'll see you in the next video.